Welcome to our Wednesday night virtual Bible class. Tonight, we're going to hit part of what we talked about on Sunday. Why do Christians doubt? Why does it come to the point where they lose their faith? As I was preparing for this, I ran across an article that was dated March 25th, 2017, out of the Barna research firm. And what they said is 2/3 of all people that are Christians doubt at one time or another. And those who said never, they didn't quite believe everybody that said never. But it had profound consequences in their lives. The biggest was they stopped attending church and worship. They doubted, so they didn't want to read the Bible. And when you doubt God, you don't pray to Him. Even family and friends that were Christians found that they didn't want to talk to them about their faith. So tonight, we'll be talking about this. And we have some answers to some of our questions. First off, what are some of the reasons people doubt? Darren wrote this: to build my faith. Yes, I realize that may not be the most biblical or spiritual sounding answer, but let me explain. I constantly question my beliefs, my experiences, my knowledge. In doing so, I sometimes doubt myself, my belief in mankind in general. When I'm at a loss for anything that makes sense in my mind, it reminds me we are not of this world. God is in control, beyond His word, this world. Thusly, I have faith in God and His love for us. Cindy writes, when prayers seem to go unanswered over and over again. Sue writes, bad things happen to really good people. And Teresa writes, when a family loses a child. Wanda wrote, when bad things keep happening. And Lois mentioned stress, depression, loss of income, etc., etc. In Matthew chapter 11, Jesus is in the middle of the towns of Galilee, teaching over and over the good word, and John has been put in prison because he had enough gumption to tell Herod, it's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. So he's in prison, and he asks his disciples, go ask Jesus, are you the one who has come, or should we expect someone else? If you go back into the history of John the Baptist was the entrance point of Christ and the new law. It was John the Baptist who taught people to repent. It was John the Baptist who taught them what baptism was. And if he just hadn't said that to Herod, he probably would have been the hero. But now he's in prison. And it's hard. And in my opinion, he has a sneaky suspicion this isn't going to end well. So he tells the disciples to go to Jesus and make sure he's the one. And when Jesus is asked, are you the one? He said, I want you to go back to John and tell him what you hear and see. The blind receive sight. The lame walk. Those who have leprosy are cured. The deaf hear. The dead are raised. And good news is preached to the poor. Blessed is the man who does not fall away on account of me. That's a quote when he talks about the blind receiving life and the lame walking, and those who have leprosy are cured. That's a quote from Isaiah chapter 35. They knew that this is what the Messiah would be doing when he came. But now John's in prison. And he's lost his ability to have much influence. So as his disciples are starting to leave, Jesus stands up and he speaks about John. What did you see when you went out into the desert? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothing? No. Those who wear fine clothes are in the king's palaces. Then what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, I will send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way before you. It's a quote from Malachi chapter 3. I tell you the truth. Among those born of women, there has not raised anyone greater than John the Baptist. Yet he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has been forcefully advancing, and forceful men lay hold of it. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John. And if you're willing to accept it, he is Elijah who has come. He who has ears, let him hear. When Jesus is letting John's disciples leave, he knows there's a chance, a big chance, that if John doesn't get out of prison, they'll forget who he is. And Jesus doesn't want that to happen. So, what are some experiences that have led you to trust Christ? Sue writes, life turned upside down and looking back months or even years later and seeing how God used it to bless me. Cindy, watching our daughter and daughter-in-law both going through multiple pregnancy losses and having no control over the situation. All we could do was trust God and his timing. The number one reason that I counsel people who have lost their faith is God didn't meet their expectations. For example, two people are getting married and they're going to walk down that aisle together and they're going to take those vows and they are going to be happily ever after. At least that's what we think. Truth is, 56% of those marriages today won't last. And if you go into the prominent people who do marriage therapy, they said approximately 70% of those who got married aren't happy in their marriage. But when they realize they're not happy, they blame God. Why haven't you worked in my marriage? Why haven't you made it what was supposed to be? And God doesn't answer the charges against him. Last night I was listening to the news and I heard a woman say the parents aren't supposed to have to bury their children. But she was having to bury her 8-year-old daughter. Where do you get the idea that the parents aren't supposed to bury their daughter? If you go back to Abraham Lincoln and listen to him, he lost a son, and it hurt. There are car accidents, and some parents lose their children that way. There are those in the military who go out and they are somebody's son or somebody's daughter. So having to bury your children isn't a mark against God. Sometimes there's just not an answer. Somebody starts a business, and they think the business is going to make him rich and famous, but it goes belly up because of coronavirus. I know this person. He invested a lot of money and borrowed a lot of money to get started. But when the coronavirus hit, his business was closed. Another one of those statistics that you listen to the experts, and the experts have one explanation, that these people don't accept that anybody can get the disease. Those who are in their 20s and 30s think they're young and strong and a little virus won't come and catch them. But the fastest groups being tested who are positive are the 20s and 30s. Unmet expectations cause people to question God, if He's really there and if He's real. But if you think about it, just for a moment, if you've got this expectation and God is supposed to fulfill whatever you think about, haven't you changed places? Isn't God now looking at you as the person who sets the agenda? And He's just supposed to make it happen. This is Joab's 3 friends. Joab has had some pretty bad luck. His herds have been taken by marauders. His crops have been harvested by the same marauders. Where he had 10 children, he now can look at the 10 graves. And when they first arrived, Zophar, Bildad, and Eliphaz, they sit there and they are quiet just to support him and listen. But that's not why they came. I'm going to use Bildad just because I read the others and I like this one. Bildad replies, "How long will you say such things? Your words are like a blistering wind." This is when Job had said, "I haven't sinned." Does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? When your children sinned against Him, didn't He give them over to the penalty of their sin? They've sinned, now they're dead, and it's their fault. Can papyrus grow tall where there is no marsh? Can reeds thrive without water? While still growing and uncut, they'll wither more quickly than the grass. Such is the destiny of all who forget God. So perishes the hope of the godless. You know why you're getting this, Job. You had to do something. You know why it's coming down. You're like a spider who's made his web, and you lean on the web, but it gives way. He clings to it, but will not hold. He's like a well-watered plant in the sunshine, spreading its roots over the garden, and it intertwines its roots with the pile of rocks and looks for a place among stones. But when it is torn from that spot, that place disowns it and says, I never saw you. The second reason that we doubt is we forget that evil really does exist. If you go to the start of this, the Lord's up there and Satan comes up and he says, well, I've been back and forth on earth. And he said, have you considered my servant Job, who is just great? Nobody on earth like him. He's blameless. He's upright. And Satan says, does he fear God for nothing? Haven't you put a hedge around him and given him all these things? You've blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds spread through the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a figure. Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. All that was coming around because it was evil hitting Job's house. Job didn't do anything wrong. So it brings us to our third question. How can you demonstrate faith as you go through the coming week? Cindy writes, being a teacher and all the uncertainties around schools opening, I can demonstrate my faith by not complaining and venting about every little change that has to be made. I'm also one of only 12 teachers at my school who will be returning to the classroom for face-to-face instruction. I'm showing by my faith by taking on that role. Faith that God is in control and he has a purpose for why I was one of the few chosen to go back. A lot of times we forget there's evil in this world. There's evil people, there's evil spirits, they're in this world. But you, if you know that, you won't be a Bildad who blames the victim with the crime. You'll realize evil exists, and evil at times really tampers with us. Tonight can be the night that if you've been doubting and need help, this is the place you should come. We have people here who will love you just as you are. And you can find the kind of faith that Matthew and Job showed. So have a good week. I'll see you next time. Good night.